Good evening, everybody. Thank you to everyone for coming. I was just asking the kind individual that takes care of our camera for the folks who are watching from home if they can see the full crowd, and she said, unfortunately not, but we're going to get a chance to see you for some recognitions tonight. It's always nice to see a full crowd. This is a public meeting of the School Board of West Bend Joint School District Number 1. More than 24 hours prior to the meeting, notice of the time, place, date, and subject matter of this meeting was posted at the entrance doors, at the Education Service Center, and on the district website. It was also sent to the West Bend Community Memorial Library, the Daily News, WRYU, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and other media sources that have requested notice of our meetings. I'm going to pause just to ask Superintendent Wimmer to confirm that this meeting was properly posted.
Yes, it was.
Great. Thank you. Please rise and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is a consideration to approve the agenda, which was posted in advance. I would move to approve this agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kelly. We have a motion and second to approve the agenda. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. And for the record, I should record that we have a quorum of our board present with all 7 members present tonight. So with that, let's get right into recognition. And like I'd said before, we're so pleased to have such a full crowd here tonight. We're going to invite forward Erin Felber, Athletic Director for West, who's going to walk us through, well, this first presentation, right? State recognition for the West Bend ski team. And feel free to invite up anyone you would like.
Perfect. So I'm here today on behalf of Coach John Cison and his staff. It is my honor to highlight the remarkable achievements of the West Bend Alpine Co-op ski team with special recognition for 2 outstanding student athletes. We have Kate Stram and Andre Pumala. I said it right? Our West Bend ski team consists of students from 11 different schools. I'm proud to announce that our ski team has continued its legacy of excellence by qualifying for the state championship competition for the 28th consecutive year. This extraordinary streak demonstrates the consistent dedication and high standards maintained within our ski program. At this year's state competition, our girls team secured an impressive 11th place finish, while our boys team excelled with a 5th place podium finish. These accomplishments reflect countless hours of training and determination from all of our team members. Kate and Andre, both juniors, exemplify the leadership and talent that drive our program's success. This is Andre's 3rd year in a row qualifying for state, and it's Kate's 2nd year in a row. Unfortunately, I must note that Kate recently underwent surgery following a knee injury sustained during the state competition. So we wish her a complete and speedy recovery. I'd also like to recognize team captain Mason Dorn from Campbellsport, who placed 1st overall in our Midwest High School Ski Conference and qualified for Western Nationals in Wyoming. Another tremendous achievement for our co-op program. And on behalf of Coach John Cison and our entire athletic department, I extend our sincere gratitude to the school board and Superintendent Wimmer for your continued support of our athletic programs and for recognizing the outstanding achievements of our West Bend ski team. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Felber. We invite forward Molly Hengst, our East Athletic Director, and she's going to present our recognition item for East Bowling.
Correct. Thanks very much for having us here tonight to recognize some of our outstanding milestones from our student athletes and their coaches. The East side will start tonight with our East Boys Bowling team who qualified for state, so I will call up head coach Rob Zaromsky along with his guys.
Thank you, Molly. Yeah, my name is Rob Zaromsky. I am a USB-C trained coach, and I like to bring a lot of that coaching experience that I have to the players I have. This year was probably my most enjoyable year of coaching. We only had 5 players we took to state, and we gave it our best. We finished 16th. But there were some super nice highlights inside that. by the way, we finished second in our division here. The first place division finished third, so they were out to get us this year, and they beat us. But anyways, I'd like to introduce Ian Peterson. He's a freshman this year, a first-time bowler, and his state performance exceeded his season performance. He did a great job. Seth is his first time at state. He is a junior. He rolled about 73%. He exceeded his regular season performance too. The other three players that are not here would be Mauricio Chavez. He's a junior, and he exceeded his performance at state too. He was 83%. There was Caleb Zaromsky, and he bowled 86% at state. Out of the 30 balls he threw, 20 were strikes. And he's ill today, so he's not here with us. And Jamison Lieberman, he is our senior. He qualified as individual and singles events too. He finished 92nd this year, and he was our most of the time our anchor bowler. There were times at state that we were really good. We bowled 3 sets of 5, so 15 games. The middle set, we averaged 190. And had we been able to keep that up the whole time, we would probably be in a top 5. But my hat's off to the players. I really enjoyed them this year. I look forward to doing it again, and congrats, guys.
Thank you, and we invite Molly Hanks back to the podium to present East Dance Team for state recognition.
Next up for us are my two head coaches for my dance team, Michelle Zancanero and Callie Madden, and their team. Come on up, girls.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Zancanero, and this is my coaching counterpart, Callie Madden. Together, we have the privilege of coaching the East Varsity Dance Team. Thank you for welcoming us tonight and for recognizing the incredible hard work and dedication our dancers have put in this season.
We are honored to introduce our outstanding team. Seniors, Captain Reagan Cunningham, Captain Gia Burgos, Kick Officer, Aubrey Turcott, Strength and Conditioning Officer, Michaela Schrader, and Skills Officer, Marley Andre. Junior, Maya Walksmooth, Sophomore, Sophia Justman, and freshman, Lucy Cluck, Olivia Alvin, and McKenna Davidson.
Throughout this season, these athletes have embodied hard work, dedication, perseverance, passion, teamwork, and a true love of dance in every practice and performance. We are incredibly proud of all they've accomplished and grateful for the opportunity to celebrate them here tonight.
Along with performing at football and basketball games, our team competes in dance competitions across the state and nation. This season, we competed in kick, jazz, and pom, earning placements at every competition we attended and bringing home over 20 trophies this season.
This year, we qualified for state in all 3 team routines and earned the title of regional champions in D2 kick. Our 5 soloists, Gia, Michaela, Reagan, Aubrey, and Marley, also qualified for state with their solos for a chance to make the all-state team. At state, the team placed 4th in kick, 6th in jazz, and 7th in pom. In addition, soloists Aubrey, Michaela, Reagan, and Gia made the all-state team, ranking among the top soloists in the state.
The team concluded their season competing at the national level in Orlando, Florida, where we made it to semifinals in jazz and advanced to finals in pom, placing 16th in the nation. We could not be prouder of these ladies and how hard they have worked this season. Thank you again for inviting us tonight and for recognizing all our success with our team.
Thank you, and we invite Ms. Hengst up to the podium to help us recognize East Gymnastics.
One more time. I will invite my head coach of my gymnastics team, Samantha Gostisha, and her squad.
Hello, I am Samantha Gostisha. I'm the head coach of the West Bend East Gymnastics team, and I have brought with me my assistant coaches, Jenica Newkirk and Jalen Gross. I also have our varsity team here, Brianna Blady, McKenna Orth, Lucy Merle, Cassie Cross, Madison Rummel, Lily Radliff, and Cheyenne Griswold. I am just going to tell you a little bit about our record-breaking season and our trip to state. We quite literally had a record-breaking year. McKenna Orth broke the school records for vault, beam, floor, and all-around. Our varsity team broke the school record for beam. We went 6-1 for dual meets. We took first place out of 16 teams at the Homestead Invite. We also took first place at the Valders Invite, second at the West Bend West Invite, and second at the Menominee Falls Invite. We took third at conference and second at sectionals, which secured our spot as a team at state. We also had 3 individual qualifiers for state: Lucy on beam, Maddie on beam, floor, and all-around, and McKenna on vault, bars, beam, floor, and all-around. It was an actual dream come true to take the team to state. It was the first time in 19 years that East Gymnastics qualified as a team. We placed 9th out of 10 teams in D2. Maddie took second on floor after an incredibly impressive floor routine. McKenna took second on beam. She tied for first on vault, first on floor, and first all-around. It was the first time in state history that an East gymnast was crowned champion. Also, her floor score was the 4th highest score in state history for D1 and D2. One of my favorite moments as a coach was seeing 2 East gymnasts stand next to each other on the podium. I just listed off a ton of accomplishments, but I'm most proud of these girls and the strong bond they formed over the past year. All season long, they cheered on their teammates, but also they uplifted their competitors, especially at the state level. It was an incredible season, and our seniors are leaving behind an outstanding legacy. Thank you.
Thank you. We invite Ms. Felber back to the podium. She's going to help us recognize West Gymnastics.
All right, I'm excited to call up my head coach, Kim Remillard, and Ella is going to join her.
Good evening. I would just like to recognize Ella Genesee today, but also Ella and I would like to thank everybody that has made it possible for us to be here today. We'd like to thank our assistant coaches, Alex Kane, and also Coach Hubbard. And also along our side was our parents, our teammates, and also the West Booster Club and Ms. Felber. In order to make it to state, you have to take 5th place at sectionals. Ella was able to achieve this on the uneven bars. She tied for 4th place on uneven bars, unfortunately fell short, and all around by 0.2, taking 6, and also missing floor by 0.5 and taking 6 as well. Ella continued on to state and competed on uneven bars in Wisconsin Rapids and took 28th. Ella's accomplishment is so much this season, even after losing a very best friend and teammate to an injury that was by her side, and she's still here today by her side. She worked so hard through the season, missing her teammate, that she still only had one focus and one goal to achieve, and that was to make it to state. I couldn't be more proud of her for achieving her goal and mastering her dream this season. Thank you so much for recognizing Ella and myself.
Thank you. And Ms. Felper, we have one more recognition, West Wrestling.
Last but certainly not least, we have head coach Aaron Spaeth, and he will recognize Jack and Ethan.
Good evening. I would like to thank the school board and Superintendent Wimmer for taking the time to recognize not only the wrestlers, but all of the athletes in the room tonight. I think it's nights like these that it's just an awesome reminder of all the remarkable students, staff, people that we have in the West Bend community, so thank you for taking that time. I would like to recognize our 2 state qualifying athletes for West Bend West Wrestling, sophomore Jack Lubinsky and senior Ethan Bast. We'll start with sophomore Jack Lubinsky. Jack qualified for the state wrestling tournament for his first time this past year at the 106-pound weight class. That is the lightest weight class in the state division. Jack finished his season with an overall record of 50 wins and only 6 losses. At the state tournament, Jack ended up placing 5th. He lost a very tight match Thursday night in the quarterfinals. And after a loss like that, sometimes people don't bounce back the way that they normally do. He took the time, got his mind right, and he rallied off, I think, 4 straight wins to come back and take 5th place. So a remarkable season for him, and we look forward to having him back for us next year. Next up is senior Ethan Bast. Ethan is probably a familiar face. Ethan has qualified for state wrestling 4 years in a row. Ethan had an impressive season and career for West Wrestling. Ethan finished 45-2 for the season, and he finished his high school career with a record of 183 wins and only 25 total losses. Ethan now holds the school record for total varsity wins. At the state tournament, Ethan had a very impressive state tournament, becoming the champion at the 120-pound weight class. He is now a 2-time Wisconsin wrestling state champion. Although Ethan will be moving on next year, we are excited to continue to watch him compete and study at St. Cloud State University. I am so proud of both of these wrestlers. Congratulations, Jack and Ethan.
Thank you. We are greatly appreciative of the time that everyone took to come here tonight out of your busy schedule so that you could talk about your achievements. We are very, very proud of all of them, and thank you to everyone, coaches, parents, and of course, all of the individuals who competed in all these various events. Clearly put a lot of hard work into it, and what a variety of different events. I encourage you to stay for just one more speaker. This should be very brief, but we have one member of the audience who submitted a participant comment card, and that's Ms. Jenny Orth. I'm going to invite you forward.
Thank you.
You have participated in public participation before, correct?
Sure have.
Okay. Members of the board, unless there are objections, I'm going to waive reading of Board Policy 187, and we'll just take care of the official stuff first. So you've indicated on your participant comment card that you are a resident, a parent and guardian of a student in the district, and an employee in the district. Is that correct?
Correct.
Great. I'm going to time you for the 3 minutes. I'll hold this up when you have 20 seconds left.
No,
How's
I
that?
practiced. I'm two. I thought my limit was 2.
Fantastic.
I'm good.
So you just state your name for the record, and then the
Yes.
next 3 minutes are yours.
Perfect. My name is Jenny Orth. I don't know if they want to join me, but I'll be speaking about the coaches for the West Bend East Gymnastics. So I'm a graduate of West Bend East High School, have spent the last 30 years alongside my husband, who won't be speaking tonight, teaching, and have sent 4 children to the West Bend School District, with my youngest, McKenna, graduating this year. So that gives me 124 years of experience with the district in a wide variety of capacities. So because of my experience, I'm often asked the question, what do you like about the West Bend School District? Now, while this list could go on and on and on, I'm here tonight to speak of just one reason that makes the West Bend School District exemplary. These 3 young ladies, who didn't want to come up by me, are at the top of that list. So McKenna has been blessed to have some very strong, talented, charismatic female leaders in her lifetime here. A few names like Jessica Flitter, Bridget File, Leslie Russo, Danielle Schumacher, Kristen Becker, Melissa Worth, Michelle Spaeth, Andrea Rodenkirk, Jody Kleipel, Natasha I won't try to pronounce her last name, and Jen Potter are just a few of them that come to mind. And while I will forever be indebted to these women, never could I have ever have dreamed that we could get so lucky as to have all of these incredible leadership skills exhibited in 3 coaches in just one season. These ladies are truly the terrific trifecta. From day one in the gym, I felt like we had won the lottery. Coach Sam, Jalen, and Jenica are the real deal. They have an uncanny way of taking each athlete from where they are and moving them forward. While they expected the best in each athlete, they did so while creating a culture of camaraderie rather than competition. They created an environment in that chalky Sky Garden that allowed these girls to achieve more than they ever dreamed possible. So while much of athletics is about wins and numbers and scores, we all know that it is way more than that. Watching these East Suns cheer on their competition at every duel and every invite was so much more impressive than all the records broken in the history that's been made. These acts are learned by example, and the coaches demonstrated these on a daily basis. These 3 young ladies are the epitome of what strong women empowering our youth to be strong women is all about. So as I get ready to send off my young rock star into wide open spaces, I am forever indebted to the female role models who have gotten us to this point. Sam, Jenica, Jalen, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being one of the many reasons West Bend has to be proud of.
Well, thank you. We appreciate those comments. And again, thank you to everyone for coming tonight. We're so glad you came. This is a public meeting, and we encourage everyone to stay for the rest of our board meeting. But we also know that it's a school night. You may have other things to do. So we're just going to take a pause for a little bit if you'd like to exit. But please remain if you'd like, and we'll just reconvene in a bit.
Oh, and I just want to say Golden Noodles to support Dolphins. 4-8. I forgot to add that.
All right, members of the board, why don't we continue here with a couple of additional items. So before I close all public participation, I do not see any other public participation cards. So we'll move then to consent agenda. A number of items on consent agenda. Minutes of the March 3, 2025 regular board meeting and executive session. We have 2 contracts, 1 resignation. We have no retirements. Then we have items related to supplemental work pay rates, 2025-2026 novice salary scale, early college credit program course requests, Start College Now course requests, and let's see, I believe that's it for the consent agenda. Any questions on any items on the consent agenda? I'd move to approve this consent agenda. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. Thank you. Motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The consent agenda is approved. We'll move then to reports, and we will begin with the Curriculum Committee report. Melanie Aragot, our committee chair, will give that report. Melanie.
All right, thank you. The Curriculum Committee met on March 11th. We focused on curriculum resource reviews and strategic planning for upcoming instructional changes that may occur when grade 5 is moved to the elementary school and grade 6 is moved up to the middle school. We went through 2 high school electives, athletic training and sports officiating, were previously approved by the board and have completed their resource review. The Physical Education Department will write units of study and bring them back to the Curriculum Committee for further review. Also, the district underwent an extensive review of potential new math resources, ensuring alignment with instructional goals and standards. After site visits, teacher input, and vendor presentations, the committee recommended illustrative math for grades 6 through 12. Middle school will use the Imagine Learning platform for its digital tools and assessments, while high school teachers preferred the Kendall Hunt version for its advanced equation capabilities. The next steps include moving the resources to public viewing at the Library and Education Service Center following spring break.
Thank you. Any questions for Melanie on the curriculum committee report? Thank you for the committee's work. We appreciate it. We move then to the superintendent's report. Superintendent Wimmer.
I'd like to recognize National Merit Scholarship Program Awards. 3 East and West high school students were recognized by the National Merit Scholarship Program. It's a prestigious academic competition that honors students who demonstrate outstanding performance on the preliminary SAT and National Merit Scholarship qualifying tests. So 2 students, Samantha Eckert of West and Evelyn Wolf of East, have been named finalists, which means they're among the highest scoring students in the state, making them eligible for prestigious scholarships. Elise Riedel was named a commended student, which recognizes, again, her exceptional academic promise. So this achievement places these students among the top academic performers in the nation. So congratulations to those 3 students. Speaking of recognition, the West Bend High School recent musical Little Shop of Horrors has been nominated for, it's got to be some kind of record, 13 Jerry Awards. So this awards program is for Wisconsin High School Music Theater Productions, recognizes and honors excellence in student performances and their productions. So that recent show, Little Shop of Horrors, was nominated for Outstanding Musical, Outstanding Ensemble, Outstanding Orchestra, Outstanding Lead Performers in Shay Fighter and Mason Warzak, Outstanding Supporting Performances by Mags Isaacson, Luke Fredericks, Sydney Broadzeller, Tatiana Patrick, and Chloe Bauer, as well as Outstanding Musical Direction, Outstanding Scene Design, and Outstanding Stage Crew. So the winners of those awards will be announced in June, but again, congratulations on an amazing production by our students. Speaking of students, we mentioned before that West Bend High School Student Council's Charity Week was a big success, raising more than $80,000 for several deserving organizations. Last week, the Student Council held their check presentation event and invited representatives from each organization, as well as the many businesses and civic groups who also donated to the cause. It was a great event, fully run by our students, with representatives from Washington County Humane Society, St. Vincent de Paul, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Washington County, Children's Wisconsin Foundation, and the Wisconsin Guardian Foundation, as well as the Full Shelf Food Pantry, receiving donations. In honor of their substantial contribution, the Wisconsin Guardian Foundation, which trains service dogs for veterans, has asked the Student Council to name one of their future service dogs. So they get to name a puppy, which created quite a bit of excitement. And just a reminder that March is Music in Our Schools Month. I want to take the opportunity to thank our music educators for their wonderful work, from elementary music teachers to choir, band, orchestra. Everyone is making a difference for many students. And also watch our websites, school websites around calendar. Spring is always full of performances as they show off their growth over the year. So make sure you're paying attention to that. I'd like to announce that we'll be finalizing some requests for proposals for both our website platform, which does content management. Ours is outdated, so we are looking around for those services, as well as an owner's rep for upcoming construction projects. So an owner's rep serves much like our municipal advisor did. They are actually here to serve the district as an advocate, ensuring construction projects that are upcoming are completed on time, within budget, and to high quality standards. So we'll bring those forward to the board for discussion after we launch those, see what kind of interest or services may be available to us. You'll see those back in the future. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Superintendent Wimmer on her report? Question?
Go ahead.
John, go ahead, please.
Well, I was gonna wait for a follow-up.
It kind of fit with RFPs. We were having a discussion. I'm like, this might be timely.
I kind of mentioned I was just looking to maybe get something, a follow-up on where we're at with the appraisal of buildings and stuff we're looking at selling for the referendum one.
So that fell in line, recall that last conversation we had in fall, we were talking about the board wanted us to go out for an RFP to see what other comprehensive services were out there. Just really to entertain, certainly top of mind for John, when would the board like to see that? I was thinking more of a summer lineup. Would the board like to see that accelerated to look at that? We can kind of place that. We've got a long runway around what's available for those buildings, plenty of time, but I was thinking in those summer months, we could see what services are available that would lend itself to the assessment. And then we had spoken about some engagement, especially with those communities that are around those buildings. But I'd really be open if you'd like to accelerate that a little bit, see what's out there. We can certainly place that.
Well, and certainly want to hear others' thoughts. Summer would seem to make sense, and I'm not sure as part of the assessment, I would imagine there's less going on in the school buildings at that time. Is that part of the logic?
Why don't I do, kind of as John, it's top of mind for John, why don't I think about launching that RFP process maybe a little bit earlier with the work maybe starting in that time frame. That way we're exploring what our options are. I can put that into the lineup maybe a little bit earlier than what we had slated.
Yeah, and I don't know if, obviously, we got 2 to 3 years before we're going to need to sell those. So, cost of buildings or appraisals could change pretty, quite a bit between those times.
Maybe,
so.
yeah, maybe lock in now before those prices go up.
Yeah.
Why don't I do that and target post-spring break for kind of refining that RFP, launching it, and then we can lend itself to a timeline, but to John's point, maybe locking in some pricing.
So the thought would be you'd come back to the board with a revised timeline or proposed timeline for it then?
Yep, we can, like I said, post-spring break, launch that RFP. I'll let you know when that's finalized and going out, just as I did with these other two, and then we'll go from there. That puts us at a little bit earlier to maybe secure services.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions on the superintendent's report? All right, hearing none, we'll move then to our discussion items. First discussion item, 2025-2026 preliminary staffing plan priorities. Mr. Lenny Hansen, our assistant superintendent, is going to walk us through that. Good evening.
Good evening. So there's a lot of amazing things that happen in West Bend every day, and they happen because of the many people who come together to wrap around all the needs of our students, which leads us into our biggest expense and most important expense of the year, which is staffing. So we are now looking ahead to how we're going to staff the school district for the coming school year. This is one of those first few times where you get to see the number 2026 in a presentation. You got to see it on the, whoops, what's going on here? Let's relaunch and see if we can get this. There we go. Mr. Harder led off planning for 2026 when he got to look at capital improvement projects not too long ago, and now we're going to talk about staffing. So staffing is talked about at this point early in the year because before you know it, it'll be time to offer contract renewals for teachers and certified staff, and as we look ahead to getting ready for the next year, also getting into that hiring season for staff as well for next year. So the presentation I'll go through tonight, while it has a lot of slides, we go pretty quickly because it doesn't change a lot from one year to the next. We talk a lot tonight about the priorities that we review as we develop a staffing plan, and our mission stays the same each year, right? So our core drivers, our core priorities don't fluctuate a ton because they really revolve around a few key items that we're gonna review today. And then what this presentation will do is lead us into our 2 board meetings that take place in April, where we present the much more detailed official staffing plan, which then the board gets recommendation for approval towards the end of April. So our drivers remain the same year in and year out. What are our student needs? What is our enrollment of students? And what is our budget, right? Those 3 items are going to drive the decisions that we make in order to best meet what our students need in order to achieve their goals. So student needs, we kind of break into a few different areas when we're kind of conceptualizing that. So we look at all the various academic supports, so people often will think about ratios of staff. That's one type of academic support, but there's a lot of different places that comes from in terms of classroom teachers, elective teachers, intervention supports, all sorts of other supports, support staff who are instructional as well, who are providing support for students. Then you look at our student services realm and the various supports that we provide in that area, as well as ensuring, solid access to education. So that's where you'll think about students who use a variety of different environments to learn, those who, might be requiring some additional services as well. So as we think about where we're coming from, what are some of those core strategic actions that we talked about a year ago this time as something we want to do that now have been in place? There's a lot that we could talk about, but you don't want to sit here and listen to me all night, so I'm going to do a general overview. Biggest thing to lead off with is we're a district that I think prides itself on the number of opportunities. No one around here offers more opportunities for students, both in the classroom, extracurricular, and everything, and we continue to maintain and in many cases expand the offerings, programs, and opportunities that we have for students. So we did that for the 24-25 year. As always, we really monitor our elective registration closely to adjust where our students heading, right? What programs, especially as you go towards that secondary level, where are students really gravitating towards? So we make sure we continue to staff and increase. We have one of the largest career and technical education programs in the state of Wisconsin. There's a lot of interest there. We continue to grow that program and we meet those registration needs. At the same time, while doing all that, we continue to stay within our historical class size norm range. And then we also were able to maintain most of the student services positions that were added during the pandemic using a lot of those federal funds. So we've been able to be very strategic as well as I think very efficient in the use of those resources. So that's a real high level overview of kind of where we were for this current year, where we've been. Now, as we look ahead, we start here by looking at our enrollment trend. And I'm going to show you a graph that you have seen many years in a row, but it continues to get updated each year, and you've seen the trend. We've talked about how that declining enrollment bubble, has kind of been moving through the system and is now for next year going to more noticeably affect the high school, which you can see here with our projected 9th grade numbers. And then you see a general plateauing, which we've talked about for a while, that has been moving its way through the system. What are the implications of those enrollment numbers? So, like I said, that decline enrollment bubble is really going to start to move into the high school now. Again, that may mean fewer sections, but we're going to continue to hold to those historical class size norms and ratios that we've had. That as you see that bubble kind of move its way through, you do project to have some position reductions, but we're really optimistic about being able to accomplish those through attrition. Certainly there is a reduction in force process if we had to go that route, but we're not anticipating that at this point, which is good news to share. So between, primarily retirements and one-year contracts, really thinking that we're going to be able to achieve those reductions, particularly in the certified staff area that the enrollment would call for. So we also look back at what are those big picture budgetary considerations. Again, we could talk about this for a long period of time, but I'll bring up a graph you've seen before. I think we're familiar with it. So, you hear a lot as you read about school district funding and so forth, that for quite a period of time, there's been a gap between kind of increases in revenue limits to school districts throughout the state of Wisconsin versus the rate of inflation. This is a graph you saw last year and the year before, and we continue to update it, right? So you see the gap here. The red line is where inflation kind of cumulative aggregates over the last 15 or so years. And then these blue bars is a cumulative revenue limit as authorized by the state budget year after year. So if you go back to if you're in 10, 11, you can see that they were right on, right? It was equal there. You see a gap here in 11, 12, but as you see over time, that gap has widened, and we've talked about that quite a bit at this podium over the years. That has implications for us that we certainly need to be mindful of, but not implications that are going to stop us from providing the same opportunities, programs, staffing ratios next year that we're used to. Some things that we also are keeping in mind is that the state budget is not known for the coming year. So the state operates on a 2-year biennial budget. That budget will end June 30th of this 2025 year. The right now, the legislature, the governor are looking at their variety of priorities, but we don't anticipate really knowing what that state budget is until June, July, maybe August. They do have the ability to approve the budget after the year has already started, which certainly is a unusual position to be, but we plan for all those contingencies. So we're prepared for regardless what kind of comes of that budget writing process. We talked already about revenues not keeping up necessarily with the rate of inflation, but again, we've accounted for that. We planned for that for the coming year and are still going to be looking to be able to provide all those ongoing opportunities. ESSER funding, you've heard a lot about over the last several years. As a reminder, ESSER funding claims ended September of 2024, okay? So you'll hear a lot about federal pandemic funds having ended. That is true. There are no more claims to be submitted for that. The federal government programs ended in that way. We were, I think, very strategic and wise about how we access those funds so that we were able to really stretch out programming that we accomplished through those funds. But it is something we have to be aware of, that those revenues, as we knew, were not going to last forever. Enrollment decline, we've already talked about that, but as you know, in school finance, students equal dollars, right? That's how the state funds education. So we always want to be mindful of what is the implication of a gradual decline in enrollment for the district. We forecast out multiple years as we look at that so that we're prepared and not caught by surprise when that comes to be. And something we talked about last year as well, and you've heard as well in different news outlets, so even maybe while enrollment may decline over, especially in the post-pandemic time period, you have seen some increases in various student needs, whether it's academic needs, student support, student services type needs, things like that. And then we've risen to the challenge to make sure that we provide where those needs come up. And again, that's on average. So a little overview of some of that resource allocation since the pandemic, and these are slides that we've used in past years. You've seen this information before. We've been able to really utilize a lot of resources in order to meet those increases in student needs, and then also looked at how does that break down by position, right? So this is a summary of some of, I think, the more big rock type positions that you might think of, but we've been able to invest, as you can see, in a variety of areas, whether it's math support, additional reading support, special education, alternative education, meeting our students where they are at. So thinking forward, where are we heading on our priorities for the coming year? So again, we want to sustain those existing opportunities. We want to make sure we continue to meet needs of students where they are at. And then, of course, our obligation to the board and to our communities to ensure that we deliver a balanced budget. So our process, as we look at, step by step, it's a pretty comprehensive process, involves a lot of meetings and meeting with administrators and administrative assistants, as well as other staff at each level to gather input, as well as look at options. We review all our positions, okay? So, you might say, oh, well, you added a few spots, a few positions during the pandemic. Yeah, well, certainly we analyze those, but we analyze everything, right? We want to make sure that we're providing a holistic approach to what our students need, and that means looking at all of our positions and where they are best positioned to make an impact. We work with also the various departments here at the central office and the staff that they deploy out to sites instructionally. And then, again, I keep saying it over and over, but we really have a commitment to staying within those historical class size ranges. In terms of academic support, we have already been digging deep into the registration data, and we're going to be able to continue to match our staffing to where those registrations are going. We will work very closely from the curriculum instruction side, making sure that we look at each building and each grade level, where are our math and reading additional supports most needed, where they can be impactful, and we will shift those from year to year to go where they need to be. We're going to maintain our very successful and kind of consistently stable and growing virtual program. And then the embedded instructional coaching model at our schools has been in place for many years, been really core to a lot of efforts that have been able to move learning forward, and we're going to continue that as well. We're going to continue a lot of those student services positions that we've talked about and been able to amplify service at the site level. One of the things we think makes a big impact in our district in partnering with Emily Melstrand and her team is we have a team at every school, even our elementary schools, of a counselor, a school psychologist, and a family liaison who team together to meet our various student services needs that our kiddos are coming to our building each day so that they're prepared, ready to learn, and able to access their learning. So adjustments that we foresee looking forward. So certainly we have reduced enrollment, which is going to impact revenue, and we will, meet that adjustment with staffing adjustments that are commensurate. But like I said earlier, we think that any kind of layoffs in the certified staff area would be really unlikely, and we're really confident that we can achieve any kind of reductions through attrition. So. A lot of slides, a lot of information, a short period of time, but again, our message this time of year doesn't change a lot. We're here to meet what our kids need, and this will lead into some really great information that we will be bringing to you in April around the formal staffing plan. So happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, we'll look ahead to when we come back in April.
Thank you for your presentation. Board members, any questions this time for Mr. Hansen?
Just got a quick one.
Chris?
And it's mostly because I don't know because I haven't been here as long. But since 2020, you talked about how many programs have been enhanced, positions and all that. So how many have we decreased? I mean, what has been the offset as you've increased positions?
Sure. So I can provide you with data. I can come back to the board with specifics. I'd hate to misspeak. We've certainly used primarily attrition, and perhaps solely attrition since then, as certain positions maybe have waned away in terms of either the need or the budgetary support for them. But primarily, as enrollment has declined, we've been able to kind of gradually condense that. But I can provide the board with some additional information next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
But there have been several, right? I mean, our enrollment looks very different than it did 5 years ago, and we've matched staffing to meet that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's known, because I guess for a layperson, if you saw the data before, right, enrollment's going down, all this bad, scary stuff, and along with the money that's coming in, but then you're saying that, well, we added all these positions and it's been great. So obviously there is a counter there, and I want to make sure that we're open.
No, it's a great point, because when when the pandemic first hit, there was an infusion of resource, but also an infusion of need and supports to meet that need, right? So we're always really proud to talk about how this school district, stayed open, throughout. When we came back September of 2020, whereas many districts, they didn't open for a year after that, right? We stayed open every day, and so there was an infusion, right? But certainly since then, enrollment has declined, and we've been able to take kind of a right-sizing approach in a gradual manner rather than a sudden, mass reduction. And that's the approach we try to take for sure, but it's an excellent point.
I think one of the things that would be helpful, to your point, Public, in one of the next meetings, we bring an overall FTE and where they are and where they aren't, so you can actually see where that's overall declined. So we've been able to maintain the programs, but that kind of affordability of declining enrollment over time, you might be collapsing classrooms over time. That doesn't change a program, doesn't change those pieces, but it's a reduction of FTE in one spot allows us to maintain in the other. I think that would be the helpful piece for you.
John, go ahead.
I'll just point out, so one of the biggest increases obviously was special education paraprofessionals, but from what I understand, we've never really been able to get everyone we needed, right? I mean, so I'm assuming that's kind of filling a lot of the spots that were empty anyways?
So a couple pieces that have been integral since Emily started leading the department was analyzing caseloads and management. And you're right, expanding where perhaps we put a certified teacher and then some support staff. So that is a way more comprehensive process. And again, that has been a targeted group because it's been, Lenny's spoken to it through hiring and that, the retention and the attraction of those employees and trying to retain them over time in that field is difficult.
Mm-hmm. Are you speaking like positions that we couldn't fill?
Vacancies?
Yeah,
like
so
vacancies?
when I visit the schools, I mean, and I speak to some of the special education teachers and paraprofessionals, it's one of the biggest concerns is they don't have enough people to take on all the work that is needed for those positions. So I was just pointing it out that, it's a large 15 positions filled for it is probably, barely getting to where we need to be in the school. I did have another question on the math portion. So 6 positions for math or reading intervention. I'm not. Are we looking at the actual curriculum or the way that it's being instructed? If that's something kids are not picking up, obviously math is always probably a struggle for kids, in high school and middle school, and just with that being one of the main struggles that kids deal with through school. Is there like an audit being done or something being done to look into why we need so many of math intervention positions filled?
I can speak to that piece. So you saw, bolstered by Act 20, significant changes in English language arts, specifically targeting your earliest readers, phonemic awareness, and maybe some of those stumbling blocks to long-term reading success. So we've seen some amazing gains that's been implemented this year, and that will be ongoing. You see us scouting all the way through 5th grade. Next year, when we talked about the curriculum, kind of what we're targeting, we are expanding to accelerate, to your point, the grade 6-12 ELA, and the analysis will actually start this year. We hope to get considerable jump into it this summer so that we can dig in over that. So that's one of those changes that we talked about. And then the curriculum committee had just met, reviewed that comprehensive work for our secondary math. We are bringing forward a new resource for the public for viewing because our results have been stagnant in that area. So that review is complete, and we're moving forward to that public viewing piece. So that'll come back before the board after that viewing period with a recommendation on that resource, which would, again, same analysis. We kind of go all the way upstream. Instead of throwing something at the end after kids didn't get it, what should we be doing different at the outset of instruction? So I'm confident that acceleration of secondary ELA coming in over this summer and right away in fall, and then seeing it home on that secondary math is going to have some gains for us.
To your first point, and Dr. Wimmer spoke a little bit to it, but positions that maybe we struggled to fill in the past. So I do like to point out that you're right. And you go back 2019, 2020, there was sometimes, a lot of difficulty, and especially in the early part of the pandemic, filling those positions. And I want to commend this board because you took action to make sure that we could hit the compensation marks that were necessary to improve in that area. And I would say we're pretty strong right now in terms of our ability to find positions. We track the amount of time it takes to fill a position from the day it's posted to the day it's filled. There's been a substantial reduction on average there when you look over multiple years, and that's, I think, both due to the work this board has done to meet the compensation needs, and then also the work that's being done at our site levels by our leaders, because we are retaining paraprofessionals at a much higher rate than we did 5 years ago, right? And when people stay, that's another position you don't have to go back and fill. So I think there's been a combination of things that have helped us in that area.
Other questions? I think what I'm hearing is the approach that we're using this year, like we did last year, is quite largely consistent. Would that be kind of a quick takeaway?
That is correct.
Great. So the next time we'll see this, you talked about April. Maybe you can just give a little foreshadow. You talked about this earlier, but just to recap.
So we bring the staffing plan for discussion the first meeting in April, and then approval at the second meeting. That really times out well with when the state statute deadlines are around providing contract renewals for certified staff, which is at the end of April. So it all kind of comes together at the same point, and then we're usually able to turn around beginning of May and provide those contract renewals for staff.
Okay. Thank you. Last call. Any other questions? All right, we'll see you at a future meeting then. Thank you for your presentation. We move to our next discussion item, which is elementary boundary consideration. And Superintendent Wimmer, I believe you're going to walk us through that.
Yeah, so even though we're targeting change for kind of the grade level configuration with grade 5 going back, in the 6-8 middle school being in the 27-28 school year, we've been actively working on models around where those boundary lines would fall of who's going to which elementary school. So in meeting with different groups, I've kind of sketched in considerations for determining what is a viable option. So I'm seeking feedback from the board perspective on that, and that may continue to grow and build. These certainly aren't definitive, but I'd also like to talk about that process. I know that it's important for this board to seek input from families that are impacted. I'd like to, instead of us kind of going through what are the models and what do we think and then going back out for engagement, I'd actually like to work with each site and their principal and their families to talk through different options and opportunities to build what we would deem viable options for consideration. So I'd like to engage in those conversations this spring with families at each one of the elementary schools to kind of build that and then bring forward a recommendation and a piece for the board to engage in that process. And certainly board can be part of those, but I know that that's a really important piece of the work, and to have people and to think of all the nuances of, but where does that one line fall, and what about this? We know that there's going to be just maybe some slight wiggling. We've talked about predominantly being able to have Fair Park and Decorah because of the size with their closure going into Silverbrook, but again, I want to make sure that I engage in that. So I really would like to hear board feedback on kind of things that should be considered or process so that we can frame that up for families.
Just from a general process perspective, when we talk about setting boundaries, this isn't something where we just look up in state statutes and it just draws it for us.
Absolutely
so
not.
we have total flexibility to do that?
Yep. So you're right. In statute, our boundary of our district is there, but all your internal boundaries of who goes to which school, those are local considerations. So we define that for ourselves. And again, knowing that we've got this reconfiguration and planning for where is building going to take place, where are subdivisions happening, all of those pieces, what does that look like? Because in the schools that remain, we want to have them efficient. I don't want to have one full, one less empty. I want to make sure we're planning long-term, but I'd like to hear.
Yeah, I just have one question and then one statement. My question is, when you're reaching out to families, like for me, I have 3 kids that are in Decorah right now, but by the time this happens, it's only going to impact one of them, right? So are you just going to be targeting those younger elementary school families that are actually going to be impacted by this?
I would see possibly 2 phases. I think everyone should be invited to the table in the discourse, whether or not there's an impact. They'll have kind of a feeling around some pieces or things to consider, some nuances. And again, our board fully supports inter-district school choice as well. So even with boundaries, we allow for that process too. So that families, maybe a lot of times I see it for childcare mostly, like we need to access childcare over here, and that makes more sense for the family. So we work with families on that basis too. But to your point, and then maybe it's a little bit tighter around who is this really impacting when we have a model. Mm-hmm. Maybe doing another round of feedback would be more appropriate than maybe a 2-phase approach.
Yeah, and then my comment was, and I guess it's maybe just me as a former mayor who's walked every block of the city, paying attention to the actual neighborhood boundaries, I think is more important. Just because I know, those friends groups, right, and the people that are growing up, it's the neighbors that are there with you. So drawing an arbitrary line through a neighborhood isn't going to help anybody. Keeping those neighborhoods together as much as possible, I think, would help to ease that difficult change that's about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Just generally, when you talk about competing forces, right, I would imagine if, on the one hand, we could draw a very complicated border, that may impact transportation, right? I mean, I'm just thinking, can you maybe talk about what are the competing forces here?
So to Mr. Jenkins' point, you look at it, you actually work first with, we did some preliminary modeling around enrollment and understanding where and what we could do with the buildings. And right now, we're working with the transportation company around what does a full 3-tier model transportation system look like. Right now, I have about a 1.5 tiers. And what that means is when I start a bus Perhaps Chad's running the high school route, and he starts that bus first, and that starts a tier, and then his next shift, he's picking up, an elementary school. So right now, I'm running a split tier. In most systems, I can run a high school level, and then either your elementary, middle, depends on your start times, another layer, and then that third layer. It saves time, it saves money, it helps because I need less bus drivers. I actually would have shorter routes. So it sounds really weird, but this kind of consolidation creates some efficiency. So right now, we've been working with transportation, and to that point, some of those things are looking for where are my hazardous places, what's got a 4-lane highway to it, what's a natural neighborhood, I'm not going to split that. So we've been working with them on those pieces first. So our bus company is who we're working with currently. So that's what I'd like to take is some of maybe those potential models and these pieces and start that conversation with families.
Questions, comments? I think the approach that you've outlined makes sense.
I like Mr. Jenkins' idea of maybe picking up a second wave of feedback after we find something that's got teeth to it and figuring out who exactly is impacted and then putting that in front of them again. I'll bring a timeline of that. I'll set up initial conversations with the different schools, families, promote that, put a timeline of that, and then work that into a timeline process and bring that back just for future discussion to let you know the status.
Any other questions or items of feedback? And Superintendent Wimmer, you got the guidance you needed? Very good. Thank you. All right, that was our last discussion item. We move now to action items. And we have a number of second readings for several policies that we looked at prior meetings. And just before we begin, Superintendent Wimmer, just correct me if I'm wrong, this is a second reading for a number of these?
Correct.
And
They're
go ahead.
second readings. It is possible with unanimous action that you can take action on a policy. So several of them were benign. I've chunked them. So we could put those out, or the board could, if we want to pull any aside, to continue the process, but we had no significant shifts. The one that you do not see is the one around, we talked about transportation eligibility and those different miles. That's been pulled. We'll bring that back because we need some of those numbers to analyze and look at. Other than that, that first one represents the 166. We had done some pre-work to even define the policy language with the board. And brought that. So that may be ready for potential action should the board choose.
Sure. So why don't we start there? Board members, are there any questions or comments regarding this first action item, policy for second reading 166, school board member electronic communications? Are there any objections to considering this for approval on the second reading?
No.
Hearing no objections, then I would move to approve policy 166, school board member electronic communications as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second to approve policy 166. Any final discussion? This requires unanimous vote, and anyone who has questions, feel free, of course, to vote no. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries unanimously. We'll move then to policy for second reading in the 200 series. Superintendent Wimmer.
Yep, again, these two policies we're just updating. We're trying to align through policy committee all consistent language. This is just using consistently the word school board versus board in isolation on these two policies.
Board members, any questions on this item? Any objections to considering a unanimous approval?
No.
Seeing no objections, I'd move to approve policies in the 200 series as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Temez. Motion and second to approve the policies in the 200 series as presented. Final discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion also carries unanimously. We move then to the policies for second reading in the 700 series.
In the 700 series, there's three distinct pieces. There's a set of series where no changes are recommended. We'd be updating the date of formal review by the board. Then there's a few that had some formatting changes, and then again, some very small changes to content, really representing some alignment, using the word school board, and then making it consistent formatting for the USDA information and some corrections there. So those are the changes recommended for that. So again, if the board would like, we can take those by bucket, or if they'd like to consider, since they're largely just formatting or minor cleanup, you can consider taking action as well.
All right, thank you. We'll start. Are there any questions, board members, on any of the items that have been outlined here in Policy Series 700? Any objections if we consider unanimous approval? Not seeing any. All right, I would move to approve Policy Series 700, Support Services, for second reading as presented.
Second.
Motion and second to approve Policy Series 700. Final discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion also carries unanimously. And I believe that was the last item related to the policies. All right, thank you for walking us through that. Next action item, we invite Mr. Hanson back to the podium, and there he is. Resolution establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $80 million, general obligation promissory notes. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you. So something most people probably don't think about, but when a referendum passes, it's not that the next day all of a sudden all that money is there, right? There's a number of procedural steps that take place in order for a school district, municipality, anybody passing a referendum that you go through in order to ultimately collect those proceeds, which are then used on all of the projects that were discussed in that referendum. So today's action item is the next procedural step in that process, as the district is coming close to completing that process of collecting proceeds for the majority of the amount that was in the referendum. So as you've seen before, we've talked about, we work with a number of different advisors on this journey. The financial advisor, PMA, the underwriter, Baird, legal counsel through Quarles and Brady largely assists as well in the process of getting us to this next procedural step. So what we are preparing to do is to issue bonds that would then be sold and then the proceeds collected. And those bonds are what result in a repayment for the district over the period of time that was not to exceed 20 years, as said in the referendum question. So that sale of those bonds is coming up in just the next few weeks. So this procedural step today is the board giving approval over parameters that would be in place over that sale of bonds. So when I talk about parameters, we're talking about some of those big boundary pieces of what any sale of bonds must fall within. And they're all things that we've been communicating to the public and to the board throughout this entire process, going back to last summer, really. So you're talking about a maximum interest rate that it won't exceed, which aligns with the rate that was used throughout all of the communications in the fall. You're talking about a maximum term upon repayment as well. And then you're talking about an amount. Now, we work with those advisors to identify an ideal way to time the issuance of bonds. So as we know, the referendum itself was for $106.25 million. Today's action item is around $80 million, so a majority of that. But you don't necessarily go out to referendum for the entire amount out to a sale of bonds all at once, because you really work with your advisor to figure out the timing of those projects. You want to time it out correctly so that you don't, you aren't paying interest on money that you don't intend to use in a more immediate fashion, as well as you maximize just kind of the timing around interest and investment returns on those dollars. So in working with the advisors, $80 million for this first issuance was the recommendation from both Baird and PMA. And then the remainder, we would plan to go out about a year from now in the spring of 2026 for that remaining portion at that point. At that point, there would be another parameters resolution. So what this parameters resolution authorizes the administration and then its financial partners that it's working with to do is to go to market to sell these bonds, but we must stay within these parameters that were communicated to the public at the outset and throughout the referendum project. Once that sale eventually takes place, which we anticipate is going to be right around the start of April, the board and community would get notified of kind of the outcome of that. The president and the treasurer would sign kind of the final documents around that. And then at our next board meeting, we'd come and report back as well so that everybody has communication around that. You know, we have a pretty elaborate plan of ongoing communication to our public around this just entire process. Not just what construction pieces are happening, but also how we're wisely managing the financial, assets that the district's working with in this process. We've met with several financial partners, banks, and so forth around the most advantageous place to house these proceeds so that the district can make best returns on those dollars while we gradually expense them on projects. We're continuing to meet with banks and others who are interested in providing that service for the district, but at this point, our existing banking relationship is providing the best offer to the district in terms of how those proceeds can be used. So at this point, that's our current plan, but we're not locking in on anything because we're here to advocate for the community on how their dollars are best used. And we'll continue to keep our eyes and ears open throughout the coming years, really, as these projects commence to make sure that we make best use of them. So the timing that we're kind of looking ahead at is following this resolution being approved by the board. Again, early April would be the actual sale of the bonds, facilitated primarily, that's Baird's wheelhouse as the underwriter with some additional supporting partners. And that would then result in the district actually taking in these proceeds right around the middle of April. So the resolution today authorizes us to stay within those core parameters, interest rate, term, dollar amount, as we then proceed and look to the market, look for that ideal time in early April when conditions are best for the district to proceed with that sale.
Thank you. So with the parameters, I noted it rang a bell because it looked like it really did mirror the language that was on the referendum question. So I noted the interest rates. This is a not to exceed. And so maybe you can just describe generally, as I look at that rate, I think we can probably do better than the rate that was listed there. Now, financial markets can change tomorrow, and I'm not a bonds expert. But can you talk a little bit about, we have this underwriter relationship, we have another relationship with someone who's watching out for us. How will we ensure that we're getting a decent rate on when we borrow the money?
Absolutely. So you may recall when Brian Brewer from Baird stood at this podium a couple of months ago, and he showed some graphs of where kind of trends have been. And right now it is a relatively favorable environment for the district right now. Again, I don't have that crystal ball either, but we are optimistic that we're going to beat that rate that was initially used. We used a rate that we felt comfortable we could hit, but conditions have not changed substantially in that market since Mr. Brewer was last here. We communicate with him on a weekly basis and sometimes on a daily basis right now as we're coming up on this point in the process, and he continues to be optimistic about the rate that the district should be able to secure. And then our financial advisor, PMA, has echoed that sentiment that, again, you always get the disclaimer, right? Nobody has that crystal ball, but right now conditions appear to be favorable for us to outperform the rate that we initially started with.
Board members, other questions?
Yeah, I just had, so how did they come up with the initial $80 million number? I mean, were they given a work list of, initial items to be started, deposits, down payments, whatever, because obviously we haven't seen any of those. So, I mean, how do you determine $80 million is the right number to start with, and start paying interest on $80 million right away?
Right. So they look at the entire construction schedule for all of the various projects. Well, then we work with Findorf as well as EUA, where those costs primarily come from. While you can't, at this point until we finalize exact, design of schematics and everything like that, can't give you down to the penny per se. They can give you a pretty decent estimate of the pace at which you're going to expense those dollars depending on what project. Obviously, a project like a brand new Jackson Elementary School is going to expense in a very different manner than a renovation at Green Tree, for example. So they give us some parameters that we look at, and then this is where PMA really steps in, takes that information, takes its knowledge about how it sees other projects proceed and so forth, and they come up with some scenarios that are most likely. And then looking at that, they'll look at, okay, what is the ideal timing to both start the clock on repayment, but also to be able to earn interest on those dollars while we wait to expense them. But you also have to be careful that the government has certain rules about you can't earn too much interest per se. Mr. Jenkins, I see nodding his head because you deal with that in municipalities as well. So trying to stay within this sweet spot of maximizing the return that you're getting while not falling into some of those traps where actually if you exceed it, the federal government takes some of those earnings back, right? So you want to be able to keep the community's dollars in the community, and that's what PMA's analysis works to do.
Okay.
Good question. Other questions?
I just have a quick one. I thought it was interesting, and maybe I'm just not reading it right. Under Section 2 for the terms of the notes, so are you stating that when we go out to the market, these will be the principal amounts and when we'll be paying them? Are you dictating that? Or is this an example?
So these are the parameters this is an estimate of it. They will kind of tweak these on the day of the sale because in that market, you might be selling year one's principal to one investor and year two's principal to a different investor, right? So they will, Baird as the underwriter, will come in and move those needles ever so slightly year by year, but this is kind of that starting point. And then within some of the documentation that investors are looking at, this is put forth as kind of initial table, but it's not locked in until that sale really happens.
Okay.
But that's
Gotcha.
a great question. Yep.
Other questions? John?
When we do, obviously this is years in the future, but when we do move forward with the sales of the buildings we're closing and the properties, those will, I mean, ideally we would just put those straight onto the principal, correct? In a perfect world?
So there's the state and the federal government has certain rules about where you can put proceeds from sales versus repayment schedules. So you kind of have to house them in different areas, but how you leverage those dollars, perhaps to pay down principal or so forth, you have freedom to do that. But you can't, it's not as flexible, say, as maybe your home loan where you can just say, well, I got a check here, I'm just going to immediately drop that in this bucket. Government just doesn't allow you it to be quite that fungible, but strategically you can take approaches like that where you say, okay, we're going to have proceeds here, and when the government opens the window for that to happen, we can divert them in this direction. But yeah, they don't quite let you move. Like you can go log on to your mortgage today and make a payment today, another one 6 days from now. You don't quite have that same flexibility in municipal bonds and repayment, but you can use that strategy.
I think if I remember right, we have the ability, for instance, if the board wished to park it in one of the many funds, we talk about various numbered funds, that's an option. And I think if I remember right, during that period of time, if we wanted to invest it and have it earn interest, that may be permitted as well. So you're really talking about kind of holding it alongside until one of those windows opens up. That's an option for the board.
Correct. It does have to be, no matter what, even if you just have for one day, you do have to allocate it to one of those funds. Certain funds the state allows you to place it in, certain funds it does not. But then, again, then you look at strategically, all right, if we're going to have this sitting over here and we want to use it for this purpose, how, when the time comes, will we move that money around? Yeah.
Good question again, thanks. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? We're hearing none. I want to be sure that this is appropriate because I would imagine this is, from a legal perspective, this is very important. So I'll read, hopefully, someone will stop me if I mispronounce something. I will make a motion to approve a resolution establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $80 million general obligation promissory notes as presented.
And I'll second if that motion was correct.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. We have a motion and second. I'll read it one more time. Motion and second to approve a resolution establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $80 million general obligation promissory notes as presented. Any final discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Appreciate your work on that, Mr. Hanson, and the explanation as well.
Thank you.
right. That, I believe, was our last action item. So we move then to our board meeting calendar. And I'll list off several of our upcoming meetings. All of these meetings are scheduled currently to take place at the Education Service Center. April 14th, our regular board meeting at 5:30 p.m. April 22nd, Curriculum Committee meeting, 4:30 p.m. April 28th, regular board meeting, 5:30 p.m. And May 6th, a Policy Committee meeting at 4 p.m. Any additions or corrections to the calendar at this time? Just encourage members of the public to look for the official postings as the date or the time or the location of these meetings might change. We move then to items for follow-up and communication. Are there any items for follow-up and communication on with regard to future agenda items?
So just wanting to call out those pieces. I know it kind of fit a little bit more naturally when we were talking about RFPs, but bringing back the assessment of buildings when we launch that and kind of a timeline for that piece, as well as I'll flesh out that timeline around that boundary discussion with our families and include a supplementary conversation. And if you have any other feedback on some of those parameters and vetting plans, just let me know. But you'll see those 2 items be brought back for follow-up.
Okay. Other questions? All right, hearing none, we've reached the end of our planned agenda, so I would move to adjourn. Is there a second? Thank you. I believe it was Mr. Donaldson. Thank you. Sorry. All right. Motion and second to adjourn. Final discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Thank you to everyone for attending and for watching. Hope to see you at our next meeting. Have a good evening.